But let's talk about someone else with a mental problem.
I do love making fun of mentally ill people. So.
Yeah, so Wyatt, our old buddy Wyatt, who used to be a proud member of the TRS forum until...
He was a TRS power user.
He was a power user on the forum until I told him one time. This is actually very funny, and I was sort of misguided. And I even told him later on that he was actually correct about this. Is like Anglin had like lost some debate to Sargon and kind of made himself look stupid.
Yeah,
and he was really melting down about it on the forum. And I was like, "Will you just shut up? Like we don't." Basically, my point was like, "Shut up! Like we don't need to call attention to this."
Yeah, no hotels online.
And actually, Anglin was really mad at me because I had the plan for that was that he would secretly give me the link to the chat, and I would jump on and like fuck with Sargon and like bail him out and help him. And I actually just fell asleep and totally forgot about it. And so he was kind of left without a net. And then when I actually felt really bad about it. I don't give a shit anymore. Felt bad about it at the time, but I did wake up and I had all these messages from him, and I was like, "Oh fuck, dude, I forgot." And the other thing is, I totally forgot the day that it was, and it wasn't even like it was if I recall correctly, it wasn't really a major plan. It was just like we just sort of messaged with it. Yeah, we'll do this. It'll be funny. You can bring me in. Sargon had a habit in those days of running away whenever I would get added to the chat.
Yeah, actually, Porcelain when he did a documentary on Sargon actually even highlighted that at one point about how Sargon was always ducking you constantly.
Well, Porcelain was I don't know if he's anymore. He was a listener for a while, and so he's a I don't know. I mean, oh god, doxed. No, but I know that he was well, obviously he was because he did that stuff. But anyway, so. Yes, but he was always doing that, and so Anglin thought it'd be very funny to do this, and I totally blew it. I actually did feel bad about it, but in any case, so I was telling him, Wyatt, like, shut the fuck up. Like, will you shut up? I was trying to do a solidarity, right? This shows where that gets you. And I was like, dude, just shut up. We don't have to focus on this, or just, like, either, basically, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And he was, like, having this emotional meltdown as if, like, the world was ending. It was so bad. It was like the worst thing that happened. Everybody was embarrassed. I was coping. I refused to see it. I refused to deal with it.
He was always like this during the Trump campaign. I was like, anytime there seemed to be like a campaign misstep, he did this exact same bit.
And I was like, dude, it's like, seriously, you're Streisand affecting this shit, bro. Like, just shut the fuck up. Like, who cares? It's one thing. Everybody's gonna forget it in a week or a day. Like, just stop.
Or 7 years later.
Well, nobody knows about it now. He probably doesn't even fully remember it, right? and I was just like, and I was just like, dude, like, just chill the fuck out, bro. Like, just stop it. Like, you don't need to. And he was constantly like, I was like deleting posts, and he was like making new threads. Like, the mods of this forum refuse to deal with this issue. They won't confront it. And I was like, what does confront? What does, like, let's sit down and have a powwow. What happens now? Oh, you just sit around in despair that Anglin lost the debate? Fucking cares. Anyway, that was like the original thing. So I banned him. At least I basically didn't even intend to permanently ban him. I banned him to shut him up, to have a cool off period, right?
Yeah, like what I did a judicial notificer. Like,
right,
you gotta chill, dude.
Yeah, and sometimes people get all up on something and they can't. You just gotta give them a cool off period because it's like, dude, look, we just don't want this on the site right now. Will you just stop? Just stop. Just shut up. Go to lunch. Will you go to lunch? You know, like I'm trying to run a website. Go to lunch. And it's like, I don't want to ban you permanently. I just want you to right now stop. And I understand you have your ass in a bunch about this. I know exactly what that's like. It happens to me too. I'm asking you, chill. And but he couldn't do that because he's an emotionally unstable, weird, like overwrought person that is just like, I don't even know what's wrong with him.
I guess that explains why he got so attracted to a Holocaust deferral.
Well, this is, I think, ultimately the motivation. He doesn't probably himself remember it, but now he's been doing it for so long, it would be such a climb down. Because I think what his motivation was, and I hate to do like this kind of a thing to attribute things to people when, rather than like he just actually thinks it, like he's defending it. But in his case, it's not that explanation is off the table. There's another reason. And I think the reason is he's defending himself, right? He's done it for so long, he can't stop. He can't walk it back because this would be way too much of a blow. But initially it was a way that he thought that we were like, he never really was particularly convinced by any of the stuff we were saying. He was doing it as a meme. He never really believed that it was fake, and he all he thought was like, the weight of power is behind this. I can say this and I'll like win. This will be a good way to get back at these guys. This will be a good way to humiliate them.
He's a weird online person who structures his identity around things that he likes and no longer likes.
Right. So he's like, this will be a way for me to sort of like regain power and control in these relationships. So I can do this, and since I'll have the weight of power behind it, it'll be easy. It'll be simple. And in the end, he probably actually thought that it was just another conspiracy theory. It would be like, oh, I've decided that I hate flat earthers now, so I'm just going to go ahead and, he probably thought it was something like that, right? But it wasn't. In fact,
and also, well, because he probably had exposure to a lot of low IQ people with bad arguments.
Yes, there are bad arguments. There are low IQ arguments, and I've made some of them, but I've now since corrected, because I've learned more, and I've corrected those bad arguments. And he still expects me to make bad arguments, and he still makes bad arguments. And the other funny thing is, the argument that we had yesterday on Twitter, he's had it before. If you follow Kodo Forum, which I don't know what happened, I think there was an issue there, okay? There was, again, wow, imagine that, the personal issues had some kind of meltdown on the right wing. That's a crazy thing that ever happened. They had some internal meltdown. I don't know what it was. I don't know the parameters. I don't know the sides, and I don't take sides in it. I like Gurmar and what he does. Fundamentally, I'll probably just side with him because he does the best work, right? I don't know anything more than that. I do know there was some dispute, and I don't know what happened to the forum. Maybe it's back, maybe it's not. I hope it does come back, because there was a lot of really valuable stuff on that forum.
I'm seeing that it's back. I see Nessie's been in there posting.
Okay. Oh, Nessie's in there? Okay, good. Nessie got me banned last time, that fucking faggot. I should actually block him on this new account. I'm going to do that later. But anyway... but he would get his ass handed to him constantly. Also, like, shout out to Hector. Shout out to Lamprecht. Those guys are fucking always killing it on the Kodo forums.
I think his post might actually be gone, though. I think they had to do a
full... Like, we
just
need to purge some of his data here. This is why this is not edifying. But, he would just constantly get, like, wrecked by these people. And so none of the arguments he made yesterday has he not had multiple people that are very knowledgeable know and refute and tell him it's stupid and show it, and yet he just will repeat it. Like, he's doing the thing of, like, exactly kind of like what Hitler was talking about. Like, we thought this issue was settled, but now again the next day he's just back saying the same thing, right? And he won't acknowledge any of the things that I was saying to him yesterday. I'm sure it's not the first time he's had the debate. I'm sure, and one of the funnier things was, like, long ago, before he was even doing or was really known on the Kodo forum, many Twitter accounts ago, I had another debate on Twitter with him, in which
just quickly, the old forum has been archived. I don't know if it's working very well right now, but you should, if anyone who wants to go look at Wyatt's old posts, you should be able to find them on the old forum.
Good. That's good. So we actually had a debate years and years ago, and I don't know if I can find it, but funny, I mentioned it yesterday, and then some people still were making fun of him about it, in that I posted pictures to him, because he was trying to throw shade on Gurmar's experiment and the blue walls and the cyanide and shit, as if like it would be because he only did half the work, or even not even half, maybe a quarter, maybe a tenth, and he saw the argument that the Jewish chemist that was always debating with Gurmar made, and of course he was doing motivated reasoning, so he never looked into what the other side was saying. Only like curse, just like what Miles Power did. He quickly Googled to find when he said he was going to respond to Gurmar's book, which we challenged him to do, and it took him like 2 years to do it. It's very funny how he issued these challenges, and then these people come back like 2 years later, right? Also, just so you know, I offered to Wyatt to be on this show. He said he wasn't going to do it, so he's gonna. What we're gonna do here is what he said on the internet is gonna have to stand as his arguments. So he had the opportunity to come on, and he said no, because the podcast is not a good place to hash these things out. And I'm like, look, Wyatt, I'm used to dealing with people that are not neurotypical and making allowances for their behaviors. So
Wyatt, he has me as the co-host. So
right.
He can handle you.
It's not even. It's like I don't need to just. I understand your fear is like socially because of my better ability to verbalize and articulate than yours. That I'll just mog you. I would do my best not to do that. I would do my best to let you speak as long as you wanted to speak.
I would even moderate and shut Mike down if he's speaking over
you.
you.
You could do that. Yeah, so I'd be more than happy to let you speak as long as you wanted to and say as much as you want before responding to you. But he's not going to do it because whatever. He would make the excuse literally that because I am better at speaking than him, because of that fundamental power dynamic, it's fundamentally not fair. And I'm like, well, then you have a problem because how are you ever going to defend your position? You think that Twitter is some equalizer.
Like a free flowing conversation doesn't work as well to be able to do his preferred form of argumentation, which is usually snark and personal attacks.
Well, it also means like when you do it's harder to pin somebody down online because what you do is
you have time to think about like how you have time
to think about, but also he can continue to step over things that he doesn't want to respond to, or continue to ignore things, or continue to misconstrue arguments and not be held accountable. Whereas talking, I could say like, no, hold on, stop, no, you have to that's not an accurate characterization of this. This is the point. You have to answer this. This is what you're saying. This, you can't easily weasel out from under stuff the way you can online, right? Example being the issue over like the number of pits and how they were used and the slippery stuff he was doing with that, which I'll get to in a second. Anyway, so let's just start. Let's just start with his hell thread, right? Let's see. What if I use this one?
It is funny that he's using Fediverse terminology for it as well.
Oh, hell thread?
Yeah, because the hell, it's not the only place where it's used, but the reason why hell thread was often frequently used on Fediverse is because the way that the Fediverse works, it's very hard to keep replies organized and easy to read because of the way it's structured. So it always became it would eventually become any thread would become like a tangled mess where people aren't really sure who's responding to whom at any given time.
Arguably, Twitter can happen like that too because and that did eventually happen where I don't think I could reconstruct my thread with him, right? So I'll just reconstruct some of the arguments. I don't know if I need to show every post. I might, but we'll see how it goes. So anyway, hell thread. A right-wing guide to the Holocaust, how it happened, and it did happen, debunking common right-wing myths and misconceptions.
Oh, wow. Meme brain right from the start.
Yeah. So, and he says, I started researching the Holocaust a few years ago so I could deny it for political reasons. Jewish people use the Holocaust. That is total bullshit. You started researching it to attack me. Jewish people use the Holocaust as a tool against right-wing groups and parties to prevent certain discussions and policies from being implemented that might be too Holocausty. What I quickly found out was there were things that were not so easy to hand wave away. And well, I don't hand wave them away. The first and most important thing for me was Rudolf Hess, the commandant of Auschwitz who survived the war, testified of his crimes and was put to death. And here he says immediately in before, he was tortured. Yes, he was tortured while in captivity by the British. He wrote about this in his own book before he was executed. And he even said they made him sign documents he could not read. This must mean he's a fake witness with unreliable... Yes. But then he says no.
That's literally compromised testimony.
It doesn't... Yeah, I'm sorry. You can't really pull that out. I'm just going to go ahead and say, you can't... You want to still pull that out of the fire. But he says this. The intellectual problem I had with this is he testified in open court answering questions. It wasn't a read statement. It wasn't a document he signed. He sat in front of hundreds of people and explained in detail how his camp was exterminating Jews on a mat. What does that matter? That doesn't matter. If he was tortured and forced to sign documents that he couldn't read and didn't understand, the fact that he was repeating things that also they don't also agree. The things he said in court don't necessarily agree with the documents he signed either. And there's actually a quite complex and detailed history of this, which is in a book by Carlo Montagno about specifically Rudolf Hess, about 270 some odd pages. And again, I also have here as a companion, this is what I like having this because this is a nice thick volume. It's a very large book, right? It's a big book too. This is a hardbound one.
I need to get that book.
This is $80. I got the real nice one, the hardbound one with color pictures, because I just figure I'm going to buy it. I might as well get the nice one, right? Why not? Why pay $30 less? That's not going to really matter in a year to have an inferior version. But people get the one they can afford if they want. It's also free online if you just want to look up stuff online. You can go to nukebook.org and it's free.
Wonderful.
So if you just want to use it as a tool for when you're debating and you could search things, I like having books though, and this is a great volume to have. And I was pouring through it a little bit yesterday, debating Wyatt just to freshen up. Because again, there's so many facts that it's hard to keep, particularly when we also talk about other things, right? It's like, oh, I know the answer to this one, but I have to refresh my memory. So this is a good tool for that. And so the point being that the Britannia book on Hess, it is very complicated. The documentary history of the various confessions that he signed more than one. They don't agree with each other, and then the things that he said in court, and none of it agrees with not any of it agrees with each other in all aspects, and some of it is blatantly contradictory, and a lot of it is blatantly ridiculous. So Wyatt pretending like he's some intellectual, some like honest intellectual, because he thinks the fact that he said something in open court versus like phony. And he would say like if he could.
Well, what I'm confused about is if you admit that there was coercion in the written documents, like why, like how do you evaluate then the open court testimony? Like how can you?
Well, you said. I mean, again, this is just
the argument. It's so confusing to me.
It really doesn't make sense because he says you can read the entire court exchange here. Put simply, he at any time could have denied these things or lessened the severity of these things. Instead, he gave a full account of how his camp operated that could not be beat into him. No. He says you simply can't torture information like this into somebody that lines up with so many other witnesses and documentary evidence. It's authentic testimony of a crime by the man who committed it. However, this was not the final straw for me. It was the photographs. Okay. The photographs are absurd, but like this is what I didn't argue about him with Hess. I left that one. I actually didn't touch it. I did go right into the photographs. How do you know what you can beat into somebody or not? Have you tried beating something into somebody? I mean, this was beaten to you. I mean, I guess you could say because you're such a pushover, you didn't even have to be beaten.
I mean, you ran from your responsibility as a Discord mod for the Charlottesville planning, so.
Yeah, right. So, well, and Rudolph Hess, suffice it to say, Rudolph Hess is a harder man than you. Like, you weren't even beaten and you do this shit, right? And Rudolph Hess was a much harder man than you are. So, also, you forget, they had his wife and children in captivity. This also another thing to maybe add a little bit of a.
Well, I don't think he can relate to that. I don't think he understands.
Well, I'm not arguing to Wyatt. I'm making points, right? I think he theoretically, at least intellectually, you should be able to understand how that's a level of coercion over somebody, and they were threatening to deport them to the USSR. And what do you think would have happened to them there? Well, the fact is, I don't know. Maybe you could say, oh, they're immediately being killed. I don't even know if that's what would have happened. Who knows? It's just you don't want to have happen if you're him, right? That would be an absolute nightmare for his wife and children to be deported to the USSR, which absolutely was something they threatened him with. So don't give me this shit. You can't beat or torture somebody into saying things. This is what you're literally saying. If somebody says it with their own mouth, it has to be authentic. And what it agrees with other fake shit. First of all, it really doesn't. Okay, like the amount to which it so-called agrees is extremely. You have to do a lot of massaging in order to get it to agree. Let's just leave it at that. But this idea, I'm going to dismiss the torture and I'm going to acknowledge, and he has to acknowledge, the documents don't make sense. The documents he signed don't make sense. So he signed things he didn't understand, he couldn't read, and then he testified to things. But the testimony is valid, the documents aren't. Okay, very interesting. Well, that's not what the fucking Holocaust people think, first of all. So you're doing your own thing. Again, invalid immediately. You don't get to choose your own. I'm sorry, you just don't. I mean, he would reject that, but he'd be, well, I'm fundamentally doing my own Holocaust. I have to do a novelty one because I'm doing a thing. Because he's trying to be like, I'm not doing a Holocaust one thing that favors the Jews. I'm doing one for me only. Like, this is my personal. I get to have my own personal one. But you don't get to have your own personal one.
This is my Holocaust. There are many like it, but this Holocaust
this one's just
is
for
mine.
me. This was just for me. This one suits my particular what is it? Is my particular grudges. This is
my Holocaust.
This is my particular grievances that this addresses. I'm doing the Holocaust for my own grievances, not for Jewish grievances.
Yeah, Jews are just weak little pussy boys.
Jews are weak pussy boys that walked into the gas chambers. I'm mad at TRS. That's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for me. So, it's ridiculous. The idea that people cannot be beaten, tortured, coerced into saying things. That is absurd. I get. It's like I don't even need to. I mean, it's just fundamentally a ridiculous thing to say. Oh, and it agrees with other things. Oh, sure thing, right? First of all,
I just thought of an example as well. Like, you know who else like admitted to their crimes was the people at Salem.
Yeah, witches would like admit to being witches and shit like that to avoid like torture. Like people will say things to avoid torture. People will say things to avoid their loved ones being tortured. People will say things because they have been drugged, beaten, gaslit, and brainwashed. People will say shit. You can exercise physical and psychological abuse and trauma against people to make them say things like, for example, you are saying you believe the Holocaust right now. And all that was done to you is maybe a minor inconvenience on an internet forum. And yet here you are. Like, so there you go. So then he goes, one of the biggest issues, so let's bring this up. This is where I'm really going to dig my teeth in here. One of the biggest issues with the Holocaust is how little photographic evidence there seems to be of it taking place. But this is more the issue of historians who prioritize more emotional images than historical relevant ones.
So there's like this big pile of pictures they're just not sifting through.
So no, the reason, frankly, Wyatt, they will use whatever they can. The reason, and it's very interesting how studiously they actually do ignore these things and don't talk about them, and they do prefer their emotional testimony and stuff, which Wyatt will tell you is false, but which they don't say is false. So again, choosing your own, which is just, again, I don't think you should be doing that. But here's what he is saying. So again, he's going to talk about the aerial photographs, but he doesn't even understand the aerial photographs. He was accusing me of using a debate handbook, but like, first of all, there's nothing wrong with using a debate handbook. Okay, if you're going to go into a debate and
it's not a trick. If the facts are there, those are
the facts are right. The facts are right. If you can try and like throw shade on the facts by saying, oh, your debate handbook says, I don't care. You have a debate handbook too.
He's a weird online person. They all argue in this way. It's so stupid and infuriating. Like, just like, do you care about the truth or not, or is this all about just being contrarian?
It's about being contrarian, right? So he says, for me, the most relevant evidence was the air photographs of the extermination complex at Auschwitz-Birkenau II, the gas chambers. These were taken in the summer of 1944 during the extermination of the Hungarian Jewish population. They absolutely were not. They were taken in the summer of 1944, but there was no extermination of the Hungarian Jewish population. So now these are very interesting photos. We did a whole show on these, and I'll do it again. So here we have an aerial photograph over Auschwitz. Now he's got some areas circled here. And this area right here, first of all, I have my own other picture of this. This is actually somewhat cropped. He's only showing about half of the camp here, right? And I want you to understand, first of all, what is the claim of the extermination of the Hungarian Jewish population. Now, these two, okay, at the bottom here, the two circles at the bottom look like tits, little nipples. Those two circles are those are crematoriums 1 and 2, okay? Or crematoriums 2 and 3, rather. Crematorium 1 being Auschwitz main camp. This is Auschwitz-Birkenau. And what the other circle here he has kind of in the middle left here, this is alleged to be a place where there were burn pits, and then the two circles here at the top, the little one circles crematoria 5, and the bigger one is circling a plume of smoke, okay? Now, this is all very explainable, but let's just let him go through the full argument so I can refute all of it. So he says, technically, we actually have video of the Holocaust taking place from the air. In World War II, photographs were taken in series for redundancy purposes and stereographic purposes to create 3D sand tables. You can see the pits outside of Crema 5 burning bodies. Yes, actually, you can. This is, in fact, burning of bodies outside of Crema 5. However, we don't know exactly how many there were, and it is unlikely that it is nearly what was talked about, and there are good reasons for why they were doing. One thing that's important to understand, I think, is that the fact that bodies were burned at Auschwitz is not
bodies.
Bodies. I'm burning bodies.
That's never been disputed by anybody.
Right. So like everybody gets that bodies were burned at Auschwitz. In fact, it's a fundamental aspect of the narrative of revisionists or deniers. So yes, bodies were burned at Auschwitz, Wyatt.
That's never been disputed by anybody.
So, yes. And the reason that they were being burned here at this time is because the crematoria were not in operation. And we have evidence of that because crematorium 4 and 5 never really came online. They had fundamental problems with how they were constructed. It wasn't as good of a construction method. It was one furnace with 8 muffles. It was not as good as the other ones in the 2 other crematoria, which had 5 furnaces, 3 muffles each, the muffle being the actual oven itself. And so the ones with the 8 ovens to 1 furnace were not good, and they didn't work. And in fact, they were constantly under repair, and very, very little. They actually were not in operation at all very much. And Carlo Matano has an entire book on this. There's also a table inside the Holocaust Encyclopedia that will give you a detailed account of the days in which these facilities were actually in operation in Auschwitz. Another thing is, we actually have a good accounting, a very credible accounting of how many people died in Auschwitz. There are things called the death books, or Sterbenbücher in German, the death books of Auschwitz. And they were volumes of about 1,500 pages each of death certificates issued by the authorities at Auschwitz. And they were issued when inmates or anybody at Auschwitz died. That would include staff, that would include SS, that would include doctors, whatever. People at the camp that were inmates or whoever, if they died, they got a death certificate and they were cremated. And the books, when they would fill them out in triplicate, 1,500 on sheets of paper. 1 would be saved at Auschwitz. 2 would go someplace other administrative offices in Germany. This is all documented. And what they would do when they reached the number 1,500, they would bind them and save them. The Germans evacuated these from Auschwitz and moved them someplace else. Where they were. There's an article on it in here. I could just read the article. I had it open before. Anyway, 46 of them they were eventually found by the Soviets and put in the Soviet archives, and they were hidden there until 1990 when the Soviet archives were opened. And at that time, only 46 were remaining. Some of them were possibly destroyed. 1 other was found available on the black market, like collectors and such were exchanging them, or so they're in private hands or they're destroyed, or we don't know. However, if we extrapolate from the fact that the Soviet documents initially say they found about 80 of these, and we think like 1,500 or so would be documented in each book, we have roughly about 120,000 deaths. And then there's possibly some other ones. Carlo Matano goes through this exhaustively in one of his books where he estimates the number of deaths at Auschwitz. Everybody, Jews, Poles, Germans, German staff, SS members, doctors, anybody there, 135,000 people over the course of 4 years in which there was 2 huge typhus outbreaks. Okay? So that's his estimate. I think it's the most credible, and he has the difference is he's got documentation, and he's got documentation of documents that no longer exist. So yes, we only have 47 Sterbenbücher. Now we can assume from that, okay, well, let's just assume that only the people in those 47 books died, which would be generous to the revisionist narrative because it would be fewer deaths, but he doesn't do that. He's like, well, we also have documentation that there were at one point 80 such books existing. So we actually now have to increase the number. It's a large number of people. It's actually a shocking number of people to have died in a facility like this in this amount of time. However, it doesn't seem like very many because they're lying and telling you about 6 million. They also have a table in here of the various claims of the deaths at Auschwitz over time, and going from least to most, going from like 9 million at one point down to Carlo Matano's conservative estimate of 135,000, which is also the best documented. Okay, because there's no documentation of any of the rest of this. And in fact, the lack of documentation is used as the reason for why it definitely happened. So they are literally doing an argument from silence or an argument from ignorance for their claims of all the people that were gassed and killed with no trace. Because they're not documented, we definitely know that they were killed. That's the argument they make, just so you understand. Anyway, let's let Wyatt continue here, right? So,
Yes.
so he says, technically we have video. So he talks about this photo and this plume of smoke here. We'll talk about that a little bit more. It says you can see the pits. You don't see the pits. You do not see pit. He is using the word pits. I want everyone to understand that because it's going to come in later. You don't see pits. You see one. Now, arguably, these oval shapes here, he's classifying those as pits. You know, I don't know, but maybe. But the point is, you see one fire. And you actually see it emerging from a very small point.
Don't look all that long for what like a size.
Well, the crematorium building here, right? You see the crematorium building, that rectangle. That is about. That's about. I would say it's about 50 meters long, based on blueprints I found in the Holocaust Encyclopedia. It's about 50 meters long. So you could say maybe those pits are like 20 meters long. Now, they're purported to be about twice that size, but Jews always exaggerate everything, assuming that these are actually what they're saying that they are. But so here we have then this picture, which Wyatt considers particularly damning. He says, however, shortly after hearing about those photos, I learned about the Sonderkommando photos. Well, you learned about this photo. There's one other that's similar to it, taken at the exact same time. And there's many different versions and many different exposures of these photos. Some people have said these are fake. I do not contend that they are fake. I contend they are probably real, although there are definitely some of them that have been doctored. But that doesn't mean that the source of the photo is fake. And it doesn't, there's no need for it to be fake because it doesn't really contradict anything that we're saying. So let's read what he says.
I can see why that photo would be very upsetting.
It's an upsetting photo. It's a shocking photo, but you have to remember the way this works. You have been primed with propaganda to believe something such that when you see something bad, your mind switches to the propaganda priming you've had, and you're like, oh, that all must be true. Now,
and also you fill in gaps as well that
yes, and because again, what he's showing you is not what's alleged. What he's showing you is consistent with what we allege. Actually, what he's showing you is more consistent with our story than with his own. What he is showing you is perfectly consistent with Matano's estimate of the number of deaths. It's perfectly consistent with the revisionist or the denier claim that the burning of bodies was due to a typhus epidemic. This is consistent with that. It is not consistent with the numbers and the extent of the burning that they claim. And so the idea, basically, nobody has ever denied that people that died were burned up at Auschwitz. This is fundamental to everybody's story. But what's interesting is when he's shown an image of that, rather than assuming that our narrative is the one that's true, because we say that happened too, he goes ahead and he assumes that the most extreme Jewish story is what's true, right? Isn't that interesting? Because this,
hey, imagine if people could see Europe during the bubonic plague, the Black Death, like bodies piled up everywhere. Like a massacre must have come through here.
Yes. So he says,
diseases are horrible. They're
typhus
really
is a terrible thing, and lots of people died. Nobody denies it. It is in fact integral to the denier, revisionist, whatever you want to call it, is integral to the most accurate narrative that we can come up with about what really happened. This is an integral piece of it. So this is actually evidence of what we say. This is evidence of our narrative, not his. He doesn't seem to understand that. So, which are photographs of almost this exact same scene taken in sequence from the ground. Yes, you could geolocate this to basically the exact place where that plume of smoke is coming up, right? So, additionally, we have the plume of smoke. We've done this before, but I'm just doing it. It's been years, so we'll do it again. So look at, this building is 50 meters long or so. So assuming these shapes here, these oval shapes here, and we're talking about unfortunately my mouse is not coming in, so.
I just saw it just now, but there it is right there. I see it.
You see the mouse here?
Yeah.
Well, you see it because it's over the OBS screen. I don't think it's getting recorded. Okay. So here we have the crematory, the building in the top left of the screen, and you see the plume of smoke and the oval shapes next to it. Okay. Now, that building is about 50 meters long. So the place where that smoke is coming from is not very big, and this is going to become important in a second. But here's the ground photo of the same scene. So he's saying that there's some pit here, and these would be presumably Sonderkommandos or Jewish inmates or whatever people that were there helping and moving these bodies and throwing them in. Now, I would count, if you want to actually count these bodies, frankly, you're going to get a couple of dozen, 20 or 30. It looks like a lot, and they're piled up in a weird way. There's one other exposure, because this was purportedly taken by a camera that the Polish resistance had smuggled into the camp and hidden, and they did 2 exposures. He doesn't have the other exposure, and I don't frankly feel like going and finding it. It's near identical to that. So they did 2 exposures of the same scene, right? But basically just the same thing. There's no new data in the other one. It's the same guys. It's the same bodies. It's the same smoke. Now, at the same time that this happened, so the plume of smoke, I don't know exactly which date. I showed a picture from August 23rd, 1944. It's highly likely that it's the same one, because of all of the 10 aerial pictures that were taken, this is what he doesn't know. You have to know all the facts. Between May and September 1944, the Allies, the United States really, did 10 aerial reconnaissance missions over Auschwitz, mainly to decide whether they wanted to bomb it or not. And they did bomb it one time. In those aerial reconnaissance missions, there are 10 pictures, essentially series of pictures, probably multiple exposures on each one, but it doesn't matter because they all happen at the same time. 10 missions, okay? In 4 of them, do you see a plume of smoke coming from that same place? Now, the problem is, though, that actually only in 2 of them is it particularly distinct. In 2 of them, it's pretty small. It's even smaller than that. And so they used to say, until Rudolph went back and looked at them again, the claim used to be you only see 2. You only see 2 plumes of smoke out of 10. But now he's gone back and said, no, I have to be, again, in his autism, he was like, no, I actually see, frankly, I think I see fires in these others as well. The other exposures are not nearly as high resolution or good detailed. So this is between May and September. This one, I think because it's the best resolution, is the August 23rd one. That's the one I showed on my timeline. Anyway, so what you have, 10 exposures from those months. These are the months in which, purportedly, the extermination of Hungarian Jews was going on, meaning 450,000 to 500,000. They usually now settled on, for some reason, 460,000 is the arbitrary number they've decided. Jews were supposedly they used to say 600,000. Okay, they've downgraded the number. Were shipped in, put in the gas chambers, gassed, burned immediately. And Raoul Hilberg has a claim about this in his book, The Extermination of the European Jews. And this is something that I brought up. Jamie has something about it on her Holocaust Claims website. If you want to go there and I think search like open air cremations or something like that, you can find her articles on this. And I reproduced some of the material on my timeline yesterday. So this is what Raoul Hilberg says about this. This is a quote from his book. Wyatt had a very hard time dealing with this. He says, the theoretical daily capacity of the 4 Birkenau crematoria was somewhat over 4,400. That's a totally bullshit number. I don't know if we have time to go into why that is. But with breakdowns and slowdowns, the practical limit was almost always lower. That's accurate. Wyatt expressed some interest in that, and I would point him in the direction, if he's listening, which I know that he is, I'd point him in the direction of Carlo Montagno's actually exhaustive work on this 1,500 page, although much of that is diagrams and charts and photos, on the crematory ovens of Auschwitz. Okay, 3-volume work, 1,500 pages. No one else has done nearly as an exhaustive of a study on this. He has. So go ahead and read that and see if you still believe in the bullshit you do, but I know you will because you're just going to dismiss it, right? You're not actually never going to read it. I don't even need to deal with the fact. So you're not going to engage with the strongest material in opposition to your viewpoint, which is another fundamental weakness of the Holocaust people. They never engage with the strongest arguments, only the weakest ones. Why don't, and this is something Cockerell was doing too. You guys don't have any academic reference. You don't have this. I'm like, no, we do. We have all of this. There are dozens of academically prepared, well-sourced, well-written, well-documented books on this. You people do not engage with them. You engage with other shit, and you refuse to engage with and try to refute the very strongest arguments for the other side. That's just negligence. Wyatt will also do that. You know the arguments are out there. You know that they're made, And they simply, same thing Holocaust controversies does. They just wait, Carlo Montagne, he's just a hack. But he's a hack that you can't fucking argue against and that you run away from. He's like the goose in that meme picture that chased after the guy. You know what I mean? And it's like you're running away because it's like, it's totally irresponsible and this would be considered in academia, in the circles of historians or any academic field, that if you're pursuing a thesis and there's someone out there that disagrees and they have strong evidence, but you just don't acknowledge it. The very strongest evidence, it's not conspiracy theory shit. It's not like Alex Jones shit. It's not weird shit talking about theosophy and Illuminati. None of that. It's academically prepared, well-researched, well-sourced, scientifically proven stuff that you people simply ignore. And Wyatt simply ignores because he cannot engage with it. So anyway, let's look at what Hilberg says, though. He says, the theoretical daily capacity of the 4 Birkenau crematoria was somewhat over 4,400. But with breakdowns and slowdowns, the practical limit was almost always lower. During May and June, the Hungarian Jews alone were being gassed at a rate of almost 10,000 per day. And higher numbers have been reached when the Lodz transports arrived in the second half of August. Now, why it takes all of this is assumed. He actually puts himself in the position of having to defend all this. Anticipating these developments, the Auschwitz specialist in charge of body disposal, Hauptscharführer Moll, a man described as a sadist with indefatigable energy. Is actually a guy they've completely slandered, this guy Moll. It's actually a tragedy. And in fact, he ended up killing himself, and he had a bunch of children and stuff. It's another fucking crime. Directed the digging of 8 or 9 pits, more than 40 yards in length, 8 yards wide, and 6 feet deep. Now, Wyatt thinks that he has evidence of these because of the 2 out back behind crematoria, or the 2 alleged pits out back behind crematoria 5, right? There's another place in the other photo that he showed where he says these are also pits. Now, he actually locates more, which at best you see 6. Honestly, if you're gonna count those shapes as pits, at best you see 6, but he tries to make it 8 or 9 because he's interested, right? So he says directed dig, but again, these aren't just pits. These are listen how they're described. Directed the digging of 8 or 9 pits, more than 40 yards in length, 8 yards wide, and 6 feet deep. On the bottom of the pits, human fat was collected and poured back into the fire with buckets to hasten the cremations. I don't know how that was actually accomplished.
The human fat thing again.
Yeah, it's right here. Right? How did that work? I mean, is that first of all, is that happening in the picture we have? Are they collecting human fat and like basting? They got like a giant baster, like a giant turkey baster, like sucking it up and like basting the bodies with the human fat. Like it's a turkey.
They're making a big typhus pot roast.
Yeah, it's literally, that's actually like what's funny because that's like kind of what they're describing. They usually baste the turkey with its own juices, I never thought of it like a giant turkey baster.
It's not based.
A giant Jew baster. Yeah, no, literally based. Basted. So on the bottom of the pits, human fat was collected and poured back into the fire with buckets to hasten the cremations. Survivors report that children were tossed alive into the inferno. The rotten remains were cleaned up once in a while with flamethrowers. Wait. Why would you need? But that doesn't make any sense. Like you have a massive burn pit, and then you're saying, but the remains are cleaned up with flame. That's just because some Jew said that, so he cites it, right? Although the corpses burned slowly during rain or misty weather, the pits were found to be the cheapest and most efficient method of body disposal. In August 1944, when 20,000 corpses had to be burned on some days, the open pits broke the bottleneck. Now, I made the point that you only have one fire. And out of the 10 exposures over the camp from May to September, which is inclusive of the time when these Hungarian Jews would have been killed, you have 6 days where there were no fires. None. No fires in any pits. Additionally, there were no days when the crematoria were in operation. This can be documented both by the lack of smoke coming out of the smokestacks ever in any of the crematoria, and by the fact that there are no exposures ever of people being lined up to be put into them. And if the stories had to have been real, of these 460,000 Jews, which is the size of a large city, shipped into the crematoria, gassed, and burned up, these things would actually have had to have been operating around the clock. So you would never have a moment. And what's the allegation that when the Allies passed over was just happened to be when none of this was happening? Oh, well, they were burned underground. Okay. Or they were gassed and then burned. They were gassed underground and then burned inside. So you wouldn't see. Well, no, because you were saying this happened multiple times a day. So you would have to have these people being lined up. And of course, when I made this point, he showed pictures of people like milling around outside of a train, or some people standing in the woods, or so he showed. Finally, the last thing he showed was some image that Eric Hunt relies on when he decided to stop doing Holocaust stuff. This picture right here, which is just a Jewish woman like being grabbed by what appear to be 3 Jewish men, and she seems to be distraught about something, and 3 Jewish men are grabbing her. The allegation is that there is no explanation for this picture other than that she was about to be dragged into a gas chamber. I'm like, well, okay. That actually doesn't make sense on a number of levels. One, we have just no evidence of that. It's just a picture. Now, they say, oh, okay, this was outside of Crematoria 5. Well, maybe so, but it still doesn't prove anything. Look, there's somebody back here. What are they doing, right? What's this person in the background doing? But also, are you suggesting that that you had to have 3 Sonderkommando for every Jew dragged into the gas chamber? That's quite a lot. That's quite a production. It's surely, if that was the case, we would have aerial pictures of all these people, right? I mean, if that's what you're suggesting.
Well, in the cope narrative that, Jews, we should affirm the Holocaust because it proves that Jews are little baby pussy boys that like turned on their own.
So other things that he claims, when I said the crematoria were in operation, he says the fact of no smoke doesn't prove anything. Now, it is true. Modern cremation furnaces are built in such a way to minimize smoke to the outside, although there still is some. But the Jews testify. Remember, the Jews testify that the area was constantly blanketed in black smoke all the time because of the constant cremations. That is not in evidence anywhere. So I don't know how much smoke would have come out of those crematoria ovens, of those chimneys, but they did have large chimneys. Okay? Crematoria 1 and 2 and 4 and 5, but 4 and 5 were almost never in use because, again, of fundamental problems with the engineering and structure of those ovens, which they just didn't work. So they were barely used, which is why that location of Crematoria 5 was chosen, because it was also kind of away from the main camp. So that was why that was chosen as a place to have an outdoor place where dead people were burned, as would have been necessary during an epidemic. They were doing that to save lives. And so I just want everyone to understand, out of the 10 exposures we have 4, not 3, 4 that actually show a fire in that same location, relatively small, about the same size, if not smaller than the one we already showed. And then there's that ground photo, which shows a couple of dozen people being burned. So the evidence we have, okay, the actual hard evidence we have from Allied aerial photographs, which are some of the only hard actual data that we have for this, give an impression of a few hundred people being burned that were probably dead from typhus. So this goes to our narrative perfectly. In fact, it fits perfectly with our narrative, particularly given that there's also, and again, you can look it up. I don't want to go through the exhaustive data. If you're interested, you can go to Holocaust. You can go to nukebook.org. You can go to Holocaust Handbooks. You can order some of the books yourself. These resources are available. Wyatt asked me for one of the resources yesterday. I told him exactly the book, and I told him he knew where to get it, and he did know where to get it. He got it right away. So this stuff is not hidden from you. This is very good evidence of our narrative. But Wyatt chose to play an extremely tactical nihilistic game, because he said, here, look, there are the 8 pits, just like Hilberg said. And I'm like, yeah, but those aren't on fire. If anything, those would have been places, and again, this is something that's attested to, where they buried bodies because they buried them in the immediate sense because they did not have the capacity to cremate all of them. And then they actually did dig those up and burn them because they had to, because they were rotting and they carried disease. So they did actually. So that would be, if anything, the explanation of those things. Could also be the origin of the testimony. But Raoul Hilberg says that these were burn pits with infernos. At no point do you have that. And he was saying, well, does he say anywhere that all of them would have been in operation at the same time? I said, well, no, he doesn't, but he does say plural pits, just like Wyatt said plural pits. Burn pits. But he showed you one pit and he said pits. There was only ever one fire. And he was accusing me of playing like some kind of goalpost. I'm like, no, but he's like, because he's like, you're not, it doesn't say that only that multiple pits would be in use at the same time. I'm like, oh, but it doesn't say only one was in use at the same time either now, does it, my friend? So we can both play this game. But in fact, he does in every reference say pits and give you the impression that these would have been in use at all times. He says at one time, at some days, 20,000 people would need to be burned in one day. So you think that just one is going to be sufficient for that? So again, he's playing fucking games, and he was accusing me of it. And this was ultimately the excuse for why I didn't want to come on the show, because like, you're already just lying and doing nihilism, right? And I'm like, dude, listen. I mean,
okay. Wow, that's quite the projection right there.
I mean, well, if you think about it, he actually didn't use the term tactical nihilism. I used it on him, but he was doing a number of other different. If I did fallacy shit, I could probably locate like 15 different ones he did, but whatever. But the thing is,
get judicial notificer on it.
Yeah, this would be a productive thing you can do. Go to Wyatt's thread and give us all the fallacies. But the question is, you heard Rob Hilberg's.
That would actually be a redemption arc for him.
Yeah, well, you heard Hilberg's. You heard me read Hilberg's thing. Like, what impression did you get from reading that? Did you get the impression that there were 8 massive inferno pits, or did you get the impression that we could play fast and loose with the number, because in fact there's no evidence of 8 or 9 pits burning massive infernos at any point, right? Like, let's be honest though, right? Like, let's stop with this. Stop with your fucking semantic games, because remember, I can just turn it right back around on you. It doesn't ever say there were 8 pits dug, but only one of them was ever used at a time. It doesn't say that, does it, Wyatt? So, you know. And in every case, the word pits is plural. Now, this is an insane level of like ridiculous detail to get into to talk about a crime in which supposedly 6 million people were killed across an entire continent. And we have to do the very fact that we have to do this is very interesting, right? So that picture of that woman being grabbed, this is sort of like a final. And Eric Hunt, and I know where he's getting this from. He got that argument he got from Eric Hunt. Because Eric Hunt used that particular picture in his essay where he repudiated all of his past views and decided to become a Holocaust affirmer. That very picture was used. So I know where you're getting your shit, Wyatt. But again, when you find yourself at a point where you're taking one picture of a Jewish woman, 3 men kind of grabbing a Jewish woman who appears to be struggling or distraught or something, I don't know. Maybe they're even helping her. It's not, we just don't know, right? And this is now evidence of a continent-wide spanning crime. Because you're saying that she was definitely, there's no other explanation for that, and that she was being dragged into a gas chamber. Well, that just doesn't work. I mean, at that point, it's ridiculous, right? Now, the other photos he showed, I want to show them to you here. So, you showed this picture. We've showed this picture too. We've done this picture too. Remember, we did the bit with like, this is like the Dario Goodbye Me Too photos. Because this was like... Because this is like we were talking about, because in the picture you can see, I don't know, it's not clear, this is not a very good exposure. There's also, again, this picture, I'm not saying it's inauthentic, this is another supposed one of the Sonderkommando inside the camp exposures, which is supposed to show people being led to a gas chamber. In fact, what this shows is women taking a bath, because there was a reservoir at this part of the camp out back behind the crematoria, possibly also a reason why that was a location chosen for burning, because there was a nearby reservoir in case things got out of hand. But these women were bathing in it. Okay, and these women are nude, but they do not appear to be being led anywhere. In fact, there's only one security guy there. There's only one Sonderkommando. And the joke we did...
Because I'm having trouble kind of making out what's in this photo.
Okay,
which one is the guy standing up right?
The guy right, bottom right, where you see a guy with a white shirt and brown pants or dark pants.
Yeah,
he's also holding something that appears to be some kind of water pitcher or water jug, and he's got a hat on. Right. The gag that we always did is this is like Dario Goodbye, like creeping on these naked women. Right. Like the Dario Goodbye Me Too photos exposed. Like you could find that video still. I think it's on Odyssey and possibly on BitChute. I don't know if you want to find that old video from old episodes of TDS where we used to do this. Anyway, there's multiple versions of this photo too, some of which are obviously faked, where they have like clearly doctored up and like pasted on like weird faces of the women and shit, and it just looks odd. But again, I don't, and just like there's weird doctored up pictures of the other one too that make it extremely touched up, making it look very strange, and in fact leading to claims by some deniers over the years that in fact the photos are just faked. I don't make that allegation. I just say, like, let's assume it's real. It could be fake, but let's assume it's real. What does it show? What it shows to me is women, and this is the standard explanation. This is women that were being given a bath, and the fact that you can see some towels here in a sharper exposure. You see there's a bunch of towels here. He's got some water here, and these women here do not appear to be in any distress. They are getting out of a bath. They are drying themselves off. So these people are not being led to a gas chamber. Okay, so the next one he did was this. Because my argument was like, it's not, because he said the smoke doesn't prove anything. And I'm like, well, okay, but there's also, again, it's not just smoke. There's also no pictures of people being like lined up around these crematoria, as there wouldn't be if they were actually being used as crematoria. There's no reason to have like thousands of people lined up around them. So even if they were in use, some burnings were being done. At some of them, there's no evidence of it from the air because the chimneys aren't in operation, and additionally, there's no like mass numbers of people lined up to go into them. So he says this one is that, and I'm like, well, no, all you have is a picture from Auschwitz with a line of people, but this building is not a crematoria, right? Now, you can see, if you look in the background, there's the crematoria. The building up, like upper left in the background. I think that's a crematoria. I could be wrong. I think it is. But what this building is, and you see the railroad tracks right here, this is the check-in office. That's where they're going. Right? That's where they're going. And the same thing applies here in this photo. Now, I'll click on it because I think that it's not, we don't get the whole, okay, so here, I'll have to go to the other, I got to go over to the other, here we go. So, this one, he also says, this is Jews being led to the crematoria. Now, I don't think so. Here we have a train that's arrived at the station. Here are the railroad tracks. Here's 2 railroad tracks. And here is, if you look, again, I wish I had my pointer, but if you look in the back, center back, upper left, you can see the crossing over the train tracks, right? And then you see the hut towards the upper left, right? That's the same little house. That's the registration office. Now, you have a bunch of people milling around outside of a train. You got them here. You have them there. And then if you look, if you can zoom in on the picture in a better way, maybe let me see if I do. Okay, it's not really any better, but there's a gap where there's a gap right where that crossing is, right where the crossing over the tracks, there's a gap in the people, and then the people on the other side are facing the opposite way. They're facing towards the people in the foreground of the picture. Now, if you see the 2 chimneys in the background, those are the 2 crematoria. So his claim is this is people being led to the crematoria. There's no other reason for them to be in this part of the camp. Well, other than the fact that's where the railroad tracks are. And they're getting off of a train. And they're not being led to the crematoria. The crematoria are very far in the background. There's nobody around the crematoria. And in fact, this photo is very famous and has been doctored in the past by Jews to show massive black plumes of smoke coming out of the crematoria.
And also, it doesn't. I just don't. I mean, like, I'm speaking rhetorically here. What is like? What does this even prove? Like,
it doesn't prove anything.
For all I know, that they just got off the train and they're not sure where they're supposed to be going.
That's what's really happening.
They could just be standing around, just looking around.
The only thing I'll say is that you do see some people crossing over the railroad tracks, and you see some people milling around the registration hut. You see some people milling around something. A lot of people are milling around. This is not people. One thing that's for sure. This is not people. We could theorize. I have my theory. I gave it to you. Granted, it's a theory. One thing that's for sure is these people are not being led to the gas chambers. There's no evidence of that. He says that that's what's happening. His claim is that
that's completely speculative.
It's not even speculative. It's actually an extreme. It's a stretch. Yeah. And the final one,
I'm gonna try to be nice, like, and to be neutral on this. That's just completely speculative.
Right.
Like, just you can't.
And he's stealing it from Eric Hunt. This is exactly Eric Hunt's argument in his essay, like the time has run out on Holocaust denial or whatever. This is the exact photo analysis he did. He didn't even come up with this. He got it from Eric Hunt. Now, another one he did here, he's got this. So these are two different pictures. He says, why are these women and children sitting outside the Canada complex outside the wire in the woods? Well, I don't know.
I mean,
does it sitting around not being gassed?
I don't like. Yeah, what am I supposed to give you? Like,
right?
Am I supposed to like create a whole story based off one? But like, right. it's a photo. Like,
what he's doing is God of the gas, right? Because if I say I don't know, well, one thing's for sure. Those people are not being rounded up by SS officers. They're not being rounded up by Sonder commandos. They're not being gassed. They're not being led into a crematoria. That's for sure. Now, if I say, other than that, I don't know what's happening. I could speculate, but I don't know. What we see is a picture of Jews standing around, some of them sitting on the ground, some of them standing up. This one guy has a thermos. Some of these people seem to be eating. I don't know what's going on. I can guess, but I don't know. Your claim that they are definitely being led to a gas chamber is a stretch. However, you're going to do God of the gas, where if I say I don't know, you mean, okay, well, all unknowns mean gas chambers. Just like with flat earthers, just like with evolution deniers, just like with all conspiracy theorists. I don't even like doing Holocaust of the gas. Now it's God of the gas, okay? You're doing God of the gas. and so like all things that we don't know, all pieces of information that are unknown, like a picture of Jews at Auschwitz where we don't exactly know what's going on, well, that means you get to say they're being led to a gas chamber. And if I say I don't know, then you expect that your narrative by default wins out, and that's just fundamentally not true. Like again, you don't have evidence. Okay,
I'm trying to because those were Jewish women. I'm trying to imagine because Wyatt's an anime fan. I'm trying to imagine if anime girls in that photo of them just standing around.
Yes, just replace them with like anime girls. Replace them. What's his little fucking avatar as a 35-year-old man? What's this little avatar he does?
It's a character from a thing called "Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls? Is it wrong to try and pick up girls in a dungeon?"
Right. Is it wrong to try and pick up girls in a gas chamber? Right. So, right. There we go. That's our show title today, Wyatt. Hope you enjoy it. In honor of you as a 35-year-old man with what an avatar of a 14-year-old, 15-year-old girl anime character.
I think that character is like it's like she's. Because like the other character's 14, so I imagine she's supposed to look 14 or 15 as well. But she's actually it's one of these goddess situations where she's actually 6,000 years old.
Right. And then the final one was the one I already showed you, the one where he showed the picture of the woman being like grabbed. Again, the thing is, remember, all of this is extremely thin. Not only thin, it's non-existent. It is not evidence of anything. Right? But he gets this privilege of the fact that you have been primed with all this propaganda to think, oh, Jews, gas, burned, so here's a picture of them being burned. That means it must be true. But again, we're talking about scale. I hate to talk about scale, but you know what? Different scale. No, we're not talking about scale.
Now, there's a term I haven't heard in a long time.
Right. But that's important, right? Scale matters. And so, again, we're talking about an allegation of over a couple of months, 460,000 people gassed and burned up with no trace. And Raoul Hilberg claiming 8 or 9 giant cremation pits. Okay, and I'm sorry, Wyatt, your fucking tactical nihilism over the number is bullshit. You know it was bullshit. You actually know what you were doing was bullshit. And I know you know because that's when you got the most snarky. That's when you got the most snarky. When you feel like you're confident in your narrative, you aren't as snarky. But that's when you got really snarky because I was saying, well, Hilberg says there are 8 or 9 burn pits. I only see one. Now, he doesn't ever say that they were all being used at the same time. Aha, but he doesn't ever say that they were only being used one at a time either. So we can both play this game. And frankly, he kind of does say they're being used at the same time because he says on days when there were 20,000 people to be burned, the pits were breaking the bottleneck. But so were you saying we just only happened? And again, remember, there were days, 6 out of 10 days, 0 fires anywhere in the whole camp. In fact, this is something Jews have complained about. This is something Holocaust affirmers have complained about, is like, it's unfortunate that on the days when we happened to catch glimpses of Auschwitz, nothing was actually going on. So they themselves, the reason they don't use these, Wyatt, is they're not useful. So he's saying, like, I don't know why they don't use this solid data they have. Well, the reason is because it's not useful to them. If it was, they would use it. Like, think about how motivated Jews are. Super motivated about the Holocaust, right? Super fucking motivated about it. One of the reasons they don't like showing stuff like this is because it's thoroughly fucking ambiguous. You have to interpret it in a certain way. But again, it's very easy to interpret it in a much less extreme way, where, like, if you were to show this, and frankly, people generally don't apply critical reasoning because they're stupid. So all you have to do is show them spooky images and they'll believe it. But people who are trained scholars, trained analysts, they'll look at it and be like, wait a second. You're telling me that fire that you have 4 examples of, the one that is shown being the largest, that's how they got rid of 460,000 bodies? It's just not credible. Also, again, what do you show here? What do you see? What do we see? What we see tends to point to our narrative, not to his. I don't think I need to make that point again. I think everybody gets that.
Yeah.
But so finally, to go back to the thread, I gotta click back at the top of the hell thread to get it. So to go back to his thread. So after that, he goes into some other stuff. Well, actually, no. He has to start again because he was, like, rudely interrupted, I guess. Because I think at this point, I didn't even jump in it. I didn't see this till later when you showed it to me. I think later on he started to he started it again because a lot of people
he had to go on his alt because his main account got locked.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was I responding to a couple of different ones?
He was blaming Holocaust deniers for it.
Well, I didn't report them, but, like, whatever. If you got reported, that's just LOL. Okay, so no wonder I don't see it. So I don't know where the other ones were because.
Oh, it's Hooting Retard is the other.
Okay, so that's
account.
okay. So let me go to my own because I responded to some of these there, and I'll try and find it. So okay, so then he went and he started talking about the number of people. Let me just find it first. He started talking about most people don't understand that most people don't understand that it was actually an execution camp and a work camp. Okay, so here we go. I've got it here. This is where he goes, like, continuing from here, since I was rudely interrupted, these photographs line up completely with the air photographs, and there are more, like this one that shows construction of the gas chambers with the drop vents. Now, okay, here is a very famous photograph that he shows. I've seen this many times. This is the roof of Crematoria 2 while it was under construction, which I think would have been at some point in 1942, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to look up the exact years, but whatever. And the claim here is that these shapes on the roof, so this little bit protruding above the ground is the ceiling of the sub-basement where the claim was that everybody was gassed. So this is the claim of the roof of the gassing furnace. Now keep in mind, this gassing furnace, gassing cellar, supposedly is 20 meters long. Okay, that's the length of it. That's the size of it. 20 meters long by a few meters wide. I forgot the exact dimensions. In all, about 200 square meters, which is not that much. Relative, I mean, it's a big room, right? Large room, but it's not, like, compared to what they claimed went on there, it's not very big. And certainly it would be difficult to pack 2,000 people into such a room multiple times a day, as everybody understands. So the claim here is these shapes are the introduction columns, right? That's what these shapes are. Now, I don't know what these shapes are. I make absolutely no claims about what these shapes are. However, there's another picture that he's not showing you. So take me a second to find it. It's on my profile. So I'll go to my profile. This picture is included in the Holocaust Encyclopedia and many other places, and he does not show this to you. And this is another picture from the winter of 1943. I believe there's a claim that this is fake, but again, I'm just going to go ahead and say, like, yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. So here's a picture of the same structure. This is winter of 1943. Nothing. There's no columns on the roof. Same structure, roughly the same angle, maybe slightly different. You can actually see that there was some repairs going on the roof there, because if you look up there, there's some workmen. You know, it's low resolution. Let me see if I zoom in on it. Let me get the other one. So, right. So you can see some guys and some repairs being done here, but here we can see there's nothing, right? Nothing on top of that roof. There are no introduction columns. In fact, it's snowy, and the snow is uninterrupted on the top of the roof. Now you can see, oh, well, why is the snow not on this part of the roof? Well, they're doing repairs on this. I don't know. Again, I don't know, but whatever. Who cares? The point is, this is the top of this so-called gas chamber. It says, photo, January 1943, the 1 meter high structure extending from the south side of Crematoria 2 and covered by a thin layer of snow is this building's alleged homicidal gas chamber. It has no visible Zyklon B insertion events or other protrusions. So, again, you know, what is your explanation for this? Because you showed a picture. I don't know when the date of his picture is. He didn't give one. I've seen it before. But, or does he give it? He says, continuing, these photographs line up completely with the air photographs, and they're more like this one that shows construction of the gas chambers of the drop vents. Now, he didn't actually show stuff, as far as I know, about the air photographs over the crematorias 2 and 3, which allegedly would have shown the drop vents for the gas pellets. And they do have shapes on the top of those. However, I'm very usually loath to allege that something is faked. But in this case, I do. And the reason I allege it is because if you look at those shapes, the dark spots on the top of the roofs of those particular, of the Crema 2 and 3, so supposed gas chambers, which are really, in fact, morgues, as are labeled on the construction documents for those buildings. If you look at those pictures from the aerial photographs, for those to have been the structures that they were claimed to be, they would be 5 meters by 5 meters. So they'd be 25 meters square things. So, like, there'd be 25 square meters. The box, that is ridiculous, right? That's huge, and much larger than is alleged. Right, they may just be way too fucking big. And the excuse made for this is, well, what's actually happening is they look big, one, because of shadows, which couldn't possibly be, because it's all around. In fact, there's no clear place where because again, remember, when the photos were faked, they thought all they had to show was holes. They didn't understand that they had to show a column structure protruding, that things would be dropped down. So the cope for this later on was, well, the column is there, but then there's like a bunch of footprints that make it appear darker in that area because people are constantly walking around them. That's legitimately the argument made. So, as I said, I'm usually loath to argue that photos are faked. I didn't argue the case with the burning bodies. I didn't argue the one with the women in the pond. But in this case, there is really no explanation for those dark spots on the top of the crematoria buildings than that were faked. They were just added. And it would be trivially easy to add those, right? It's literally, you could do it with a pencil, or a pen or something, right? So, particularly given technology at the time. And if done, it was fairly sloppy because they're irregular in shape, and they're just a dark blotch, and they're way too big. You know, when you look at them to scale, they are way too big to be what they are alleged to be. So I'm very comfortable saying that that's fake. And also, we have the January 1943 photo that shows no such thing. And that would have been a time at which they would have been theoretically gassing people, right? In the middle of the worst time, right? So I rest my case on that. So now let's keep going. Many people will say these facilities are for burning bodies from a typhus outbreak. However, in this time period, Auschwitz had already installed facilities to help fight typhus that took place years earlier, advanced facilities too. Well, that doesn't matter. First of all, that's well documented. They installed microwave facilities, and in fact, in 1944, towards the end of 1944, they actually allege that the executions stopped. The gas execution stopped. Now, to do this, they lean on an order given by Himmler in September of 1944 that just said it's illegal to execute Jews now, which seems very damning. But you have to understand, it said nothing about gas chambers. It said nothing about death camps. It said nothing about systematic exterminations. It was talking about like executions in like a military context, like if they're like disciplinary stuff, right? And so it indicates that yes, executions did happen, and in fact, executions of Jews are documented in the death books. But again, not everybody died. Not everyone documented to have died in the Auschwitz death books were Jewish. A lot of them were Polish. Some of them were Nazis. So another problem, right? But he basically does issue this order, but it's an order that applies to more than just Auschwitz, and it's not specific at all, and it says nothing about gas chambers or systematic executions or anything like that. And they take that, although they post-date it by 2 months because they need 2 months more of gassings to happen for esoteric reasons that, you know, once you understand the whole narrative, you can understand a little bit more. They post-date it, so they make it as if it was later than it actually happened, and they say that was the thing. And I would actually say it's very interesting that on some level here you have this microwave equipment that was installed that it was actually made the use of Zyklon B unnecessary, because instead of the Zyklon B to disinfect stuff, they would put it in these rooms where it would be like bombarded with microwaves, and that would kill the lice and therefore the typhus, right? But that doesn't mean, because they had facilities for fighting typhus before, right? Like, installing facilities in 1944 to fight typhus doesn't mean shit. First of all, what about 1942 and 1943? Because there was no crematoria built in 1944. So you're saying many people say the facilities for burning bodies from a typhus outbreak. Well, yes. But so you're saying the facilities built in 1942 and 1943 couldn't have been to fight a typhus outbreak, because the typhus outbreak, they had typhus fighting equipment installed in 1944. They had typhus fighting equipment all the time. They had disinfestation chambers where they used Zyklon on the clothing and on the mattresses and on stuff. They had those buildings. And this is something that Wyatt didn't know about, and I showed him pictures of it, and I showed him how intensely blue they were, and he didn't know about that. This was years ago. He's accounted for it now because he was deeply embarrassed and like fled Twitter for a few days afterwards. But because he accused me of they were fake. And then he had to go back because in fact they were not fake, and he found like Jewish sources that satisfied his epistemological criteria, right? But again, in fact, the fact that they installed facilities in 1944 to fight typhus again points to our narrative, not his. It points to the fact that there was a typhus outbreak in 1942 and 1943 when the crematory would have been used. It's like, I mean, you're completely with me on this. It's just like, it's fucking retarded. It's the most, like, it's like you have to be engaged in motivated reasoning to buy this. Like, you have to be, because it's just a little bit of thought and it falls apart. So and then he says this was what I jumped on. Most people cannot comprehend, and rightfully so. So again, he's doing this, but he tries to put a little armor around what he's saying to give you a little bit of, he gives a little something, right? Let me hit.
Well, he's basically giving you an in to kind of like say, like, listen, like, I'm on your side, like I'm not trying to be adversarial, like, this is the correct position, like, that's
I get why you would be skeptical. Yeah, there's a few things weird, but let's think about it. You know, he's like, and it's a rhetorical tactic. It's well known. It's a way to disarm people that are adversarial to you, to say, look, these narratives that you one time believed, they were valid for you to believe that, totally understandable, but here, let me explain, right? Well-known rhetorical tactic. Everybody does it. I'm sure I've probably done it. But irrelevant, because I'm not lying. He is. He says, people cannot comprehend, and rightfully so, that Auschwitz was both a labor camp and a death camp. I actually don't think people have a hard time comprehending that. It's just they don't believe it. People have a hard time believing it. Because he always attributes, like, people that talk about, well, they were working there, and then he's like, oh, you dumbass, don't you know that they were also working and getting killed? So he says, when Auschwitz was built, its main purpose was for labor. However, later it was decided it would also be used for extermination. Anybody who couldn't work was killed. Okay, so now you have a big problem. Because what I said then was, I said, well, Wyatt, if that's true, explain to me why they had a hospital. And why there were people that were known to be convalescing in that hospital for months at a time. Elie Wiesel's father said he was in there for 3 months. He said he got foot surgery. And there's documents of this. Or at least of somebody named Elie Wiesel's father. Like the question of whether the man that they call Elie Wiesel is actually up for debate. Well, let's go ahead and assume he was in Auschwitz and he just didn't have a tattoo and he is who he says he is. He's not a total fraud. Which I think there's possibly an argument that the man known as Elie Wiesel is a total fraud that actually adopted the identity of somebody that was dead. I know that's speculative, so I'm not going to bother with it. But point being, his father was an old man who had a foot injury and got surgery and was convalescing in the infirmary for several months and was still there when the Reds were approaching, and then they decided to leave. And this is documented. So he couldn't work. Why wasn't he killed? And there's many other examples too. And so Wyatt then says, he makes something up, right? He makes something up. So he says, and he tries to steal it behind, like, making fun of me, like mocking me. So let me find the exact exchange. So I go to my profile, and I said something about, like, you know, I'm gonna go after this one specifically because it's really stupid. So, got to scroll back a bit here. I said, of all the laughable claims in the thread, I've randomly chosen this one to mock. If anybody who could not work was killed, why was there an infirmary? Why do we have medical records from it? Why was Elie Wiesel's father convalescing there for 3 months? This is absurd. And his response is, the first sentence of this post is super important here. Now, again, Wyatt, why be cryptic? Why not say what's important about it? Why are you saying super important? Because this is another method of arguing, right? Don't say what you mean. Say something like that implies that I'm really dumb and you're really smart, but you're holding something back. Just say what you mean. Just say what you fucking mean, dork. So I said there was an infirmary because it was a work camp, is what I'm assuming you'll say. Unfortunately, this contradicts your statement that those that can't work were exterminated, because by definition, people in an infirmary can't work. And I said, why be cryptic about it? Just say it. Next argument will be that the infirmary was built, then it was later decided to be a death camp. That fails since there were patients using the infirmary right up until the time when the camp was overtaken by the Reds. So then he says this, right? And keep in mind, he's doing this bit. He's continuing to be extremely cryptic. He doesn't want to say something outright because then he might have to defend it. Very interesting. I would think somebody who carries a wheelbarrow would be much easier to find on a new shipment than somebody like Mikos Naisli. Do you understand what he's talking about?
No.
Okay.
To be honest,
I didn't either. But I wasn't going to ask him because I was like, I just said that sounds stupid and like something you made up. He kind of clarified it a little bit later. So he says, that sounds completely stupid and made up. It's not about what you would think. Because again, when you start with I would think, then you're making something up. If you're saying, it doesn't matter what follows. Anything after I would think is made up. Because it has to be, right? So it's not about what you would think, it's about what you can prove. So he says to me, I'm a fucking retard, and I can't comprehend how you might need an infirmary to take care of 6 slaves that had special skills you are taking advantage of. Oh, okay, now we have okay. So now you're making a hard claim that the infirmary was only there for inmates with special skills. What's your proof of that? Do you have any evidence of that? And I said, okay, so you're just making things up.
So then, okay, yeah, then like, how does that square for all the Mengele stuff as well?
But irrelevant though. The question is like, where? I know it's not irrelevant. You're right. It doesn't square with the Mengele stuff. But again, the thing is this. He says, I can't comprehend how you might need an infirmary to take care of 6 slaves. This is what he means, because what he means is like, somebody who is just carrying a wheelbarrow and then gets hurt, they can be killed. But Mikos Naizli, if he gets hurt, he would have to be taken care of, right? That would be the idea because he's a skilled inmate.
So skilled about him.
He was a doctor. But the thing is, he says, but he's making this up though. The problem is there's no evidence of this. There's no document. There's not even amongst the bullshit, right? This isn't even claimed. So I said, okay, so you're making it up. As expected, you made this up. You think it resolves the contradiction you created yourself, but you don't have any evidence. So he says, this is hilarious argumentation. What? No, if you have evidence, so I replied to him.
No, I can do that too. No, you.
Well, I said if you have evidence, you would show it instead of deflecting. It says evidence of what? Your argument is either every Jew was killed on sight or none were. Infantile argumentation. That's not my argument. My argument is that you say that any Jew that can't work was killed. Then you had to backtrack to, oh no, but some Jews that had special skills, they could use the hospital. But again, you don't have any evidence that the hospital was only for Jews with special skills. That's what I said to him. This is the thing. He said, no, my argument is you have no evidence for your claim that the infirmary was reserved for inmates who had special skills. You made that up. And and you also were the one, you said it's infantile argumentation. You were the one that said every Jew who can't work was killed. Now you're running away from that. Because
I can't stand the way that internet people argue or not argue.
It's so annoying. It's like, fucking accept what you either dial back what you said and admit you were wrong. Like, don't do this shit where you make a statement and then you want to like do like rear guard defense of it by pretending that I'm stupid for taking you at your word. It's literally his argument ultimately is you're so dumb you believed me.
Yeah, he's being an internet person. It's so asinine and infuriating. Yeah.
You're so stupid you actually believed what I said.
Well, it makes sense because the first group of people he ran to after he broke with TRS was the Irony Bros. So they were the ones that pioneered this method of like just being an asshole online and just being an annoying internet person.
He's like
wasting, like just intentionally just wasting your time. Like, haha, you fell for my trick. I don't believe anything, and I'm just wasting your time.
Again, he also knows what he also understands. I don't think he's so dumb that he doesn't understand what I'm saying. He's trying to pretend to other people.
Yeah, no, he's not doing this for you. He's doing this for he's
putting on a show for the people that see this as if so he can own me, right?
Yep.
I mean, but dude, like in terms of likes, you know, if you want to do that as a measurement of clout, like I was
the only thing he's going to get out of this is that a couple more people who just don't like you are going to be like, yeah, get him Wyatt and get him Wyatt.
Yeah, that's the other thing is like, the people that are siding with you aren't doing so because they like your arguments. They're doing so because they hate me. And even then, you can only get a few. And look again, I don't like likes and stuff don't matter, but I still was blowing you out of the water on that front. Even though you know your account, which has never been banned, has like more followers than mine.
Sorry to factor. And he's been banned many times.
Oh, whatever. This account has been around longer than mine.
He's been through like 10 or 15 accounts. He is very online.
Fair enough. My account started on January 1. So anyway, so he says every Jew was killed on sight or none. That's not my argument. My argument is, and again, I've clarified it. You said if you can't work, you're killed. I showed evidence of people who couldn't work and weren't killed. So what you said can't be true. And your excuse for that was, no. Those people who couldn't work and weren't killed had special skills. Yeah, but you didn't say that before. So what you should have said is, if you couldn't work, you were killed unless you had special skills. But you didn't say that. And so now you have to run away from the thing you said and accuse me of being stupid for actually taking you at your word. And the other thing is like, The thing he does is like he presents the idea that, oh well, obviously the special skilled people would have a hospital and the other people wouldn't be able to access it. Of course, there's no evidence of that. There's plenty of evidence of anybody who was inmate at the camp having access to hospital and infirmary facilities. Lots of evidence of that. Lots of medical records. Okay, so you're just wrong. You're provably wrong. Documents prove you're wrong on this. But again, you're making things up. Whenever you sit and make things up, you're always going to end up looking stupid. And you try to present it as if it's stupid to not understand this inherently. Right? As if like, oh, well, duh, obviously the smart people that had skills would gab that just goes without saying. No, it doesn't go without saying. You have to say it, and you didn't say it, and also it's false. So, again, trying to just get away with shit, running away from your own statements, because, in fact, it's very easy to show plenty of people who could not work were not killed. In fact, the list of people for whom this is true and the list of incidents that can be proven through documentation about people for whom this is true is exhaustive. It is very big. And it is in, you can find such things in here, and you can find things in the book Healthcare at Auschwitz, which is a hilarious title for a book by Carlo Montano. Arguably better than healthcare in the United States. It was free. So, yeah, I don't know if I have anything else on him. I think that's about it on the Wyatt front. I mean, does he have any other arguments that we have not dealt with? Because I dealt with some arguments that he made here.
There are no arguments to be had.
Yeah, I feel like there are no more arguments. Okay, so he says, let's go through a few more. So he says, these buildings are often hand-waved away as morgues. The problem, okay, this is actually good. The problem ultimately with this argument is the amount of ovens inside said morgues. There are 15 times 2, 30 ovens with 200 within 200 meters of each other, more than any camp on Earth ever. Well, first of all, that's quite the statement. More than any camp on Earth ever. I mean, I don't even know how you go about judging that, but yes, it certainly is a large amount of crematoria capacity. Interestingly, he kind of defaults to the understanding that Crema 4 and 5 were not really ever in use. He says most concentration camps had cremation ovens for cremating dead bodies. However, none of them had anywhere near this amount. This is a staggering amount of cremation capacity for the size of the camp we are talking about, and this is just 2 of the buildings, Crema 2 and 3. These buildings are alien in nature and design. Well, that's an interesting opinion. They have 2 underground rooms that extend out from the main structure. For what purpose? If this was a morgue, why not just have it underneath the building itself? Why 2 different underground structures instead of 1? Well, first of all, you can take a look at the blueprints as to what those structures were. Those structures were preparation rooms, undressing room and preparation room, and then the morgue itself. As to why they were built outside of the building, not directly underneath, it's because of the nature of the soil in that area. Because it's a very swampy area. So it actually was better to build them the way they did than to build them deep under the ground.
Let's just ask Swamp Preacher. He probably knows.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I'm not joking. Like this, it's like. And also, I mean, I don't know if he got into later on, like doing tactical nihilism over. Oh, because I remember Cockrell tried to do tactical nihilism over this, which is very stupid. Was it a morgue or was it a bomb shelter? Hey, asshole, it's both.
Yeah, buildings can have
imagine multiple use building. Imagine that. This is the funniest thing about these 2 buildings and the other 2 ones is they were such important morgues that the Germans disassembled and then completely and then dynamited the entire thing before the Russians arrived. They didn't do this for any other buildings, LOL. Well, first of all, we don't know that the Germans did that, but if they did do it, it's possibly that they did it because when the Allies had captured Dachau, they made a bunch of propaganda pictures because Dachau had already been captured when this was captured. And they made a bunch of propaganda pictures where they piled a bunch of bodies in front of the cremation oven and pretended like it was a big extermination going on. So the propaganda was already there. So they might have done it to avoid that, but also we don't know that they did it. It could have been the Allies that did it. It's not clear who did it, actually. Just that it was done. And by doing so, conveniently, it also leaves ambiguous the question of whether there were, in fact, holes in the roof for the supposed mesh insertion columns, which never existed and have never been found. So no holes in the roof have ever been found. Nothing in the rubble. It has been extensively analyzed. Grandma Rudolph, he's got an entire model of it, of the whole thing, and he even warned them, like, I've already got it, so if you mess with it, I'll be able to prove that you did. Although they haven't, and they don't really need to, because they just rely on this tissue of lies that are just consistent, and the fact that no one's going to listen to them. So there's no holes. There's no evidence of holes. The best evidence they had was a vaguely square-shaped break in the concrete. The problem was it was crisscrossed by concrete rebar, so that couldn't have possibly been used for what they said it was. It was just an accident of how it fell when it was blown up. And that's the best that they've got. And it's also the wrong size. So that's the best they got. There's no holes. And suggesting that you built a building of reinforced concrete and then you broke holes into the roof, that's stupid. People wouldn't do that. It's dumb. And then you repaired them again and then blew it up? Like, you're just getting into ridiculous. And again, there's no evidence of any of that. It's just stuff that in order for the thing you want to be true, you have to continue to make things up, because what you're saying just isn't true. So your story gets more and more threadbare. No, they built them. They didn't initially. But again, remember this. This is what's funny, because he is now saying that they were purpose-built. That's not what Prasak says. Prasak says they were purpose-built as crematoria, and then they were converted to be used as homicidal facilities, which is why he says, and again, he's far more credible on this than is Wyatt, but you now are disagreeing with Prasak, who's one of the primary sources that your side uses. They don't actually allege that they were purpose-built to be gas chambers. They allege that they were converted into being gas chambers. They allege that they actually were initially what they purported to be. He is alleging that they were purpose-built to be execution facilities. It's not the mainstream narrative. At least that's not Prasak's narrative, which many of them rely on, although it's not even clear, and in fact, most of them just don't even talk about this at all. So he says the other buildings, Crema 4 and 5, were different design, not as efficient as Cremas 2 and 3, which is why they mainly burn the bodies out back behind Crema 5. Well, the mainly reason is because, as I said, excuse me, they were under repair for most of the time that those buildings existed, so they were not really useful. And again, you can find charts down to the day. Montano has analyzed the construction and repair documents down to the day. He can tell you which crematoria was operational and when, and even which ovens were operational, and when there was repair orders and when those repairs were done, etc. So then he moves beyond Auschwitz and he moves into. Then he says most people you encounter online will talk to you about numbers of dead, the Red Cross numbers. I don't ever talk about the Red Cross numbers. If you actually seek out the document they're talking about, it obviously is missing three very, very important camps: Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. These are secret camps. Well, here's the problem. First of all, most people, yes, people talk about the numbers of dead. Very few people cite these so-called Red Cross documents, and I'm not even sure exactly what you're talking about. But nobody that's knowledgeable about this will allege 6 million dead at Auschwitz anymore. Okay. Well, or will allege that that's their allegation. It was at one point. In fact, at one point it was alleged that it was 9 million. Okay, so that at one point it was alleged to be 9 million. They have downgraded.
I've seen the Red Cross stuff come up amongst the people who
sure, I'm sure it has.
Yeah, so that's. I mean, one of the things that Wyatt does is that he goes after the incorrect or just like unaware. Yeah. Talking points, and then it conflates it as though you have those. You would say the same things. I don't really talk about the Red Cross. I mean, there might be something to talk about there, but I've never really. He tends to conflate all forms of Holocaust denial as being the same. Well, he'll just take the easiest ones, right? Now, what's funny is now he goes into some stuff about the Action Reinhardt camps. We don't need to spend as much time on this. So again, this is made up. Just so you understand, like, this is the model. Because again, he's not going to have any photographs here because these buildings didn't exist. This is a model of what they think Treblinka looks like. Or is that Treblinka? That's Sobibor.
Okay, Sobibor. All right, Sobibor. It's very similar, right? They kind of are. There's no evidence of anything that looked like this, or if it was like they will just take, because again, the whole camp was destroyed. They will take the evidence of some structures and then just assign categories to them. So it says the gas chamber was by a different design. Instead of Zyklon B, they used engine exhaust. And again, now they have changed it from diesel exhaust, which used to be the story. They've now changed it to gasoline exhaust, a point Cockrell is incredibly insistent upon. And he actually thought I was wanting to argue that when we debated. I don't know if anybody noticed this. I picked up on it, that he was really insistent that they use a gasoline burning engine because gasoline exhaust will, of course, kill somebody much more so than diesel exhaust because of carbon monoxide. But again, you don't need, in a closed, hermetically sealed room, you don't need carbon monoxide to kill anybody. Carbon dioxide will kill people. Literally just keeping them in there, putting a bunch of people in there and sealing it, they'll die. They will suffocate. Eventually, they'll run out of oxygen and they'll all die. They'll get, now it'll be much worse than carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide poisoning is much more peaceful than carbon dioxide poisoning, which is painful and awful and like just terrible. Carbon monoxide poisoning, you just go to sleep. Carbon dioxide poisoning, meaning you run out of oxygen, like, and therefore there's a ton of CO2 in the atmosphere. This is awful. You're suffocating. It's terrible. It's painful. But they'll be dead, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to engineer anything. You have to build a room. Just like Ryan George says, I'm going to put you in a room. That's all you have to do, right? If you don't, you do that Jewish subversion, or I'm going to put you in a room. Oh God, I don't want to be put in a room. Like, again, this is very funny. Like, this didn't exist. There's no such structure as this. In fact, when they went back to Treblinka at the very least, and they found something that, like, okay, we found like a line of a foundation of a building that we could possibly construe as having been this. They like jumped for joy, and then they found like a bathroom tile. They said had a Jewish star on it, but of course it was actually some logo of whatever company they got the tile from. But it's also like, well, all that means is like that they had a bathroom.
Yeah.
So it's like that, but I'm just going to reiterate, there's no evidence. And that's why he has this computer generated drawing. There's no evidence of a structure like this ever existing at all, anywhere. And this is the same, it's a very similar, I don't know which one he's saying it is. It's the same kind of a design that they're claiming, like Treblinka, Belzec, Sobor. It's the same kind of thing that they've done for all of them. And I just want to show you, this is very funny. So they've also just like made it so you can't ever, as we know, they made it so they can't ever find anything out. I'm just going to show you Belzec real quick. So if you look at the Belzec Museum, we've showed this before, but I can't get over it. This is what they did. This is what they did. This is the whole fucking camp. This is the whole camp. They allege that 600,000 people were executed here and burned up, buried and burned up, and then reburied, and that someplace under here. And this was done after those people went.
What am I looking at? What am I looking at exactly?
This is the Belzec Memorial Museum.
Oh, okay.
So this is in Poland, and this is a whole area that takes up this rock and concrete thing with this rebar edge. It's meant to be some art installation. If you go back to this wall back here, there's like names and shit etched on it. And the whole thing, and there's one area which you don't see off to the right, but all of it's covered like this, okay? The entire thing. And there's one area off to the right where there's some trees in the midst of this that are said to be like the location of a mass grave or something. But they did this to make sure nobody could ever do any research here. They literally did this so nobody. This was in response to the guys that were trying to do like those surreptitious like ground radar investigations at Treblinka, and found that there's just nothing. There's nothing here. Like there's not the ashes of 600,000 or a million people or whatever is alleged under the ground here. So we don't need to spend as much time. The action Reinhardt and camp shit. It's funny because there's a ton of stuff about Auschwitz because most people locate Auschwitz just as the Holocaust. right? And that's also where the most deaths are alleged to have happened. It's where the most lurid
the
stories
amount
come
of
from.
the amount of Americans that claim that their great grandpa helped liberate Auschwitz is off the charts.
It's hilarious.
A fun thing for people to do, by the way, if you're on Twitter, is search for great grandfather and Auschwitz, and every month or so you'll see some American claiming that their grandfather or great grandfather liberated Auschwitz specifically, and that's why Holocaust deniers and Nazis make them so mad.
Yeah, and why why the
funny.
Holocaust particularly has meaning for them. It's like, this day means a lot for me because it's like, nah, dude, what you're just trying to literally.
That's right. Yesterday was the liberation of the anniversary of the liberation, so I bet there were a lot of that.
Yeah, it makes me sick to see it.
With Americans thinking that the Americans liberated Auschwitz.
Yeah. So, again, the idea that it's very funny. The idea all these structures are alien in nature. What's the excuse? Remember, here he has this picture, which is meant to show you a very famous picture. It's supposedly meant to show you how this was supposedly accomplished. So all these people are like here. It's like, I mean, no. You're saying that happened? How many times a day did that happen? How often did that happen? It has to be at least they'd have to say at least several times a day during peak times or whatever of the Holocaust, in which you would have to remember. I mean, at what point does the backlog become too much? Because if you're killing 2,000, you understand how long it takes to cremate 2,000 people, even in 15 ovens. This is the thing. Yeah, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary cremation capacity, but don't overestimate it, right? Because even if you have say 30 muffles working. Carlo Montano goes into in depth in this, right? And he's willing to grant them. He's generous. He's willing to grant them a time period for a cremation of 1 hour per body. He's willing to grant that. So that even if, but you can't have these things operating 24 hours. You can't because they need to be shut down and maintained, and the slag builds up from the use of the fuel. I don't know exactly how the ovens are engineered, but I do know that slag from the burning of the coke, which would have been the fuel, builds up and it has to be cleaned out and they have to be shut down because if they get too hot, the bricks on the inside of the muffles, the refractory bricks meant to keep the heat in, they will start to fall apart if you use them too much, right? So most generous would be 12 hours a day. So if you have 2,000 people, right? How long would it take to do 2,000 people if you have 30 ovens, one person per hour, 12 hours a day? So, we could do some math. So let's say, if you go 30 times 12, so that would be the number in one day, 360. So you would need, and this is peak efficiency, which you almost never get. So then that would take you 6 days. 6 days. So you go let's say 2,000 per execution divided by 360, and it's not going to be, I don't know what's the exact. Is it come out to a round number? What do you got? Yeah, 5.555555. 6 days. So each gassing would take 6 days for you to get rid of all the bodies, and that's also assuming you used both crematoria. And I don't usually like to do this type of math because I think it kind of gets silly. Let's assume you're just using one. So you're doing crema 2, you gas 2,000. Okay, you got 2,000 dead people. Now now what you do is you take their bodies out and you take them upstairs and you burn them. And you got 3 furnaces, 15 ovens. 5 furnaces, 15 ovens, right? You know what I mean, right? Mm-hmm. 3 ovens per furnace. Okay, yes. So 5 and 15. Okay, which is way better than one for 8, which is why the other ones didn't work, or among the reasons they didn't work. Okay, so you got 15. So now you got 15 times 12 is the amount, which would be half of 180. So now you're dealing with 12 days. So now you're dealing with 11, basically almost exactly 11.1 days. To burn them all. So for one gassing, it's going to take you it's going to take, because if you're saying you're using both at the same time, then it would take you that long. If you did 2 gassings, then you have 4,000 people. So the claim that they could do 4,400 people a day, it's just wrong. It's wildly overestimated. So peak efficiency would be each oven running 12 hours per day, burning one body per hour. That's it. That's what you're going to get. Best you're going to get is 180 per day, which actually, when you understand this, the fact that there were this many built and you know that there were 135,000 deaths, it actually adds up. The amount of cremation capacity fits pretty well with the known death rate. So, I mean, I don't know if we need to do anything more. I think I've done a pretty exhaustive...
No, I actually have to, I have to actually get going. So.
Yeah, you got to go, and I'm kind of, I think I've done my bit here. Wyatt, anytime
Maybe next time, or I can give you some timestamps of the if you want to do more Holocaust stuff. The they fought back.
Oh right, yeah, we forgot to do that. Maybe we can do that. There's always more. There's always just grist for the mill.
Yep.
We can always do more. So Wyatt, I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know if he did.
You've got it in a long time. So
well, again, I think it's also I wouldn't do it. I mean, the thing what Wyatt did was offer a convenient foil for this information, right? I mean, I've done this before. I know people have heard it before. They've heard the argument before. I think I've mastered the material much better now, and because there was times when I didn't know everything, right? And I made some errors back in the day. Even when we were arguing with Miles Power and such like that, I made a couple of errors, and I had to walk a few things back, which he never did.
While you studied the Blade, I studied the Holocaust.
Yes, and so it's just a good convenient foil to go at. Plus, I enjoy beating up on him. Just enjoy it. Just like it because he's a nerd. Again, but the door is always open, though, Wyatt. You can come on to the show at any time. You can try and promote your theories here. You can push this information here.
You can get a new, if you don't trust me to moderate, you can always pick a neutral moderator of your own choosing.
Pick a non-neutral. Pick one of your friends.
Yeah.
I don't care. As long as it's somebody who I can trust would actually allow me to speak, that's all I would care about. We don't really need a moderator. I'll let you speak. I don't mind letting you go on and on and on. I mean, and he said like Cockrell embarrassed me so bad that we had to delete Odyssey comments. That literally never happened.
Yeah, I saw that. It's like, you're just making shit up.
Dude, you know what happened is fucking Tony, when he was all butthurt, deleted it. He deleted shit from because he had access to the Odyssey page, which is, again, another dumb thing I did was I forgot to ban him from that before firing him. He deleted shit. Just be an asshole. So I put it back up on the TRS site. Never deleted any comments. Look, it's possible that people were moderate. We did have people moderating the comments at the time, but not for people refuting stuff. For people like calling me a Jew and shit like that, right? Like to delete people coming in to do personal attacks rather than discuss the subject matter. Somebody that wanted to say, and I made it very clear. Jamie was one of the people moderating. I was like, "Don't shut people down just for agreeing with Cockrell. Only shut them down if they come in."
We prefer to we prefer to dogpile, honestly.
I much prefer. And also remember, his thing was like, I lost so bad we had to delete Odyssey comments. No, the Odyssey comments that were deleted, if they were deleted because they were just personal attacks. We didn't delete any people that were actually arguing the case. Cockrell shut his own camera off because he became embarrassed because everybody was making fun of how dumb he looked. Something I wasn't doing.
Even that dumb Avalian woman.
She said he fucking lost his friend that he recruited to be like his buddy. This actually is so embarrassing. I don't even want to. It actually makes me cringe and kind of feel bad for Cockrell because she was like, obviously she's like married to her husband, and she was talking about how she and her husband had like a really close moments during the debate, and they found it very exciting, and they really bonded. I was like, were you like fucking your husband while you watched this?
Yes, that's I believe.
Like that was the impression everybody was getting.
I think that's the correct inference.
Yeah, that's the impression everybody was getting. And then she said like the problem, Matthew, was you're not confident, and Mike Enoch is confident, and he was just deflated. So again, like. Go ahead, Wyatt.
You want to talk about things being deleted? That stream got deleted, but not before it got screen recorded.
Yeah. Oh yeah. People were absolutely loving that shit. So no, that was not like, again, another cope, Wyatt. But Cockrell did better than you could. He did better than you could. Anyway, I think we're done.
Cockrell, another weird online person who argues like an internet person.
Yeah, I mean, it's very funny but you kind of have to when you're arguing for the Holocaust. There's really, and so do the Holocaust controversies people. They don't argue like normal don't make like normal arguments. They do like
how weird it is that the Holocaust's strongest the Holocaust narrative's strongest soldiers always argue in weird internet people ways.
Yeah, they do, and it's funny because this actually makes the mainstream historians reject them. Because they're like we don't. This is not because they would rather
they're hotheads. They'll go off script.
Well, they also are like, as I've said, they're like the people that would say like every word. They're like the inerrant, like, and I said not, I mean, they're literalists, right? They're Holocaust literalists. Yeah. They believe every word of it must be true. When the more reputable scholars that are nonetheless believers in the religion will say, well, not every word must be true. These are, it's like the comparison being to the Bible, where like most people, Christian of different denominations, will agree that some of the things in the Bible are either metaphorical or not necessarily true or mythical or whatever. They don't say like literally every word is the literal absolute truth. Like that's not something people, except for very extreme weird Christians, will say. But these guys are like that.
True, if not, just to be clear, like when you say truth, not like in like. Not saying like untrue.
I mean, fact is a better way of putting it, right? Like people, these people argue everything in the Bible is fact, such that if you have a story where in one story the prophet Samuel says, "I'm going to bring 3 years of pestilence," and another one he says 7 years of pestilence, they'll say, "Well, he said the one, and then a few minutes later he said the other." Rather than like you just have two different traditions, right? You know what I mean? So. Which is not, it's also not important. Like those type of details are not important. So people either just, like, it doesn't affect anything in terms of what this is actually means, right?
It's integral to a younger creationist model, which is why there has to be
right. But again, it's like young Earth. It's like young Earth cremationist model. Fuck! God damn it!
That's even better.
We might have to choose a different title now.
Yeah,
okay, we'll figure it out.
I think we have to do that one.
We have to do Young Earth Cremationist. Okay, yeah.
I think we have to.
We can still insert the other joke in the subheading or whatever.
I'll show you the other titles in there.
We'll figure it out. No, I think Young Earth Cremationist is probably it just has to be that. There's no other way around it. Anyway, all right, dude. Let's get out of here. And okay, God, where the fuck is the theme music? Okay, here it is. All right, we'll see everybody later.